Advances in technology means that every year, more previously unknown criminals are finally being brought to justice. Even famous unknown serial killers have finally been identified, but there are still many more that remain anonymous. Number 5. It's been more than 30 years since an unidentified individual took the lives of several women in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Between March and September of 1988, 11 women from the city disappeared. All were dealing with drug addictions, and all but one were street workers. 9 bodies were found in total, dumped along the side of highways in nearby towns. Some were missing for months before they were discovered. 2 victims were never found. Deborah Medeiros was the first to be found. Deborah was 30 years old at the time of the incident and had been missing for a little over a month before her body was found on the side of the road by a motorist who'd stopped to relieve themselves. Nancy Pava was the next victim to be found. She went missing a few days after Deborah was found, and her body was discovered at the end of July. The conditions of the 2 bodies led police to believe the cases were connected, but police didn't initially believe they had a serial killer on their hands. It took several months for the bodies to be identified. Even though New Bedford was a close-knit community and the women were known by several people, including police officers, a lack of technology caused delays in the case. In the meantime, one of the police officers noticed a disturbing pattern of missing women in the area. He connected the disappearances and deaths, and the fear that they were dealing with a serial killer set in. Police brought in search dogs to find more victims. Sadly, their fears were proven correct, as dogs were able to find multiple bodies along the sides of interstates over the following months. A woman named Robin Rhodes was determined to have been the criminal's first victim. Robin had disappeared in March of 1988. She wasn't a street worker, but was suffering from drug addiction. It wasn't until March of the following year that she would be found. Due to both the delay in finding the bodies and the delays in identification, vital clues and witnesses likely slipped through the net. Police were able to identify a number of suspects, including a former attorney named Kenneth Ponte, who had links to a number of the women and drug problems himself. There was never enough evidence to convict him, and the case has now gone cold. Number 4. Between 1988 and 1993, 7 men from the Polish city of Lodz had their lives taken by an unknown serial killer. Police were able to get a good description of the criminal, and even narrowed down the street where he lived for a time. But after the 7th attack, he vanished without a trace. The incident started in June of 1988, when neighbors reported a strange smell coming from the apartment of Stefan W. Stefan was openly homosexual. He was fairly wealthy and was known within the gay communities for wild parties. He also frequented gay bars where he would pick up men for one-night stands. When police broke into Stefan's apartment, they found his body on the couch in a state of undress. He'd passed away several days earlier. Over the next 5 years, 6 more men had their lives taken in Lodz. All were openly gay, though not everyone was as active in the community as Stefan. The second victim, Jacek C., wasn't known for visiting gay bars. According to his neighbors, he didn't advertise his sexuality, but still the criminal found him and took his life. In most cases, a number of high-value items were stolen from the homes of the victims, including jewelry and electronics. However, not all the victims were wealthy. If theft was the main motive, the criminal would have been disappointed on a number of occasions. Even after a handful of cases, police had a picture of the person they were looking for. Stefan's neighbors reported seeing a blonde man in his 20s leaving his apartment the day after Stefan was last seen. Another victim, Piotr G., was with a friend waiting for the bus when he spotted a good-looking man in his 20s. Piotr spoke with one of his friends and then left with the stranger. It was the last time that Piotr was seen alive. But police got the clearest image after the death of their final victim. Kazimierz K. was, like other victims, homosexual and fond of hosting parties where he and his friends would swap partners. The last time he was seen, he was introduced to a man who called himself Roman. Roman had been picked up by one of Kazimier's friends at a gay bar a few days earlier. They had spent the night together and had a good time. In the time that they'd known each other, the friend had introduced Roman to a number of people and paid for Roman's bus ticket. After Kazimier's death, his friends gave a description of Roman to the police, and the driver told police where he suspected that Roman had gotten off of the bus. Police made door-to-door inquiries, but Roman had already disappeared. A police sketch was widely circulated, but there was no sign of the criminal, and the case has now gone cold. Number 3. El Cico Pata was the name given by the press to Costa Rica's first serial killer. He took the lives of 19 people in the 1980s and 1990s, but has never been identified. The crimes took place in a region known as the Triangle of Death. It's a relatively mountainous area, thick with forests. It was on a path down a mountain that the first crimes attributed to El Cico Pata took place. It was Palm Sunday of 1986, and it was tradition that a number of people had climbed Cerro San Miguel to visit a church near the cross of Alajuelita. On their way back down, a group of 7 people took a shortcut. Somewhere along the trail, they met the criminal who took their lives. The crime shook the local community and made international headlines, but it wasn't a sign of what was to come for El Cico Pata. The criminal's modus operandi appeared to change at this point. He chose mostly young heterosexual couples or single women. When attacking couples, he took the lives of both the man and the woman, but showed particular cruelty to women, leading investigators to believe that he'd been psychologically abused. There was only one survivor, a woman who was attacked in 1988. She managed to get away from the criminal and gave police a clear description of the person who had attacked her. They produced a sketch based on her description, but nobody ever came forward with information. The crimes were linked by their location, which led investigators to believe the criminal was local and gave them a good idea of the weapon used to take their lives. Bullet cases retrieved from the crime scenes were all deemed to have come from the same gun, a weapon that was used by rebels who fought against Nicaragua in the 1980s. One of the possible suspects was actually a Nicaraguan soldier who'd migrated to Costa Rica in the 70s. The unnamed individual had shown a hatred towards women. He was also local to the area, and there was a brief pause in the crimes around the time that he was in the hospital. However, there was not enough evidence to convict him. Others believe the culprit was a member of a wealthy family, and police were paid off to keep his identity a secret. Number 2. For several decades, police believed they had the Skid Row killer behind bars. But after 4 decades in prison, the only person ever convicted for the crimes was acquitted, muddying the waters. Between October of 1978 and January of 1979, 11 homeless people living in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Skid Row lost their lives. All 11 were attacked in a similar manner, leading police to believe that they were all victims of the same killer. One of the final victims was a 45-year-old man named Frank Garcia. On Thanksgiving Day, he was found on a bench with multiple knife wounds. Nearby was a handprint in Frank's blood and a muddy shoe print. It was the most evidence police had found at any time at any of the crime scenes, but without a suspect to compare against, they weren't much use. There was a brief pause after Frank's death before the criminal struck again, taking the life of his final victim, Luis Alvarez, on January 21, 1979. Suspicion fell on a man named Bobby Maxwell. Maxwell was something of a drifter and spent a lot of time in Skid Row. He'd also shown an obvious hatred of homeless people, and not long after the death of Frank, he was arrested for disturbing a public order. He had a knife in his possession at the time and he was sentenced to 60 days in prison, a sentence that matched the pause between the criminal's penultimate and final victims. More crucially, the handprint found near the victim matched Maxwell's. Maxwell was arrested again, and his home was ransacked. There, police found evidence that Maxwell worshipped Satan. A logbook that was found at his sister's house was used to compare his handwriting to two sinister messages. One written on a bathroom stall, talking about taking the lives of homeless people. The other on a scrap of cardboard that read Satan, found near one of his victims. While the evidence may seem cut and dry, Maxwell's trial was more complicated. David Jones was the criminal's fifth victim. Shortly before his life was taken, David and three friends were approached by a man calling himself Luther. Only a few minutes after Luther left, David was attacked. He told his friends the person calling himself Luther was responsible. The three friends were called in by police and showed a lineup which included Maxwell. They weren't sure the person responsible for David's passing was even in the lineup. One of the key witnesses was a man named Sidney Storch, a criminal who'd shared a cell with Maxwell, who Maxwell claimed confessed to him. Maxwell was convicted of 2 of the 11 deaths and spent decades in prison. He frequently appealed, claiming he was innocent, and finally in 2010, the appeal was successful. His lawyers argued the witnesses couldn't identify Maxwell, and Storch was proven to have lied in a number of the cases he testified in. A retrial was scheduled, but Maxwell suffered a heart attack and went into a coma before it could take place. While he was in a coma, the charges were dropped due to a lack of evidence, and the case went cold again. Number 1. In the late 1960s, a sinister criminal who appeared to prey on young women stalked the streets of Glasgow. He was given the name Bible John based on the description given by his victim's sister, and a police sketch became one of the most widely circulated pictures in the city. Despite the attention, the criminal was never found, and he remains unidentified to this day. The first criminal was found in the early hours of February 23, 1968. Patricia Docker was found just a few yards from her home. She was 25 years old and married to an RAF corporal who was based in Lincolnshire at the time, and a mother to a 4-year-old son. The night she lost her life, Patricia had left her son with her parents so she could enjoy a night out. She visited 2 dance halls with her friends. Her parents assumed she was staying with one of them when she didn't return home. But when they heard a body had been found not far from Patricia's home, they grew concerned. Patricia's father contacted police, and he identified her body. Police made house-to-house calls trying to find any information about who could have taken Patricia's life. One neighbor reported hearing a woman screaming and telling someone to leave her alone, but they didn't see who it was. After extensive inquiries, police determined Patricia had met the person responsible at one of the dance halls, but they couldn't get a good description of the criminal, and the case went cold. 18 months later, new information would be injected into the case when the criminal struck again. This time, the victim was 32-year-old Jemima McDonald. Jemima's life had been taken in a similar way to Patricia's, leading police to connect the 2 crimes. She had also visited the same dance hall as Patricia the night before she lost her life. This time, though, witnesses were able to give police some valuable information. She was seen leaving with a well-dressed man with dark brown hair. He'd met her at the dance hall that night, and witnesses said he occasionally inserted Bible quotes into conversation. The man would become known as Bible John and struck again in October of that year. Helen Puddock and her sister Jean enjoyed a night dancing at the same hall as the first 2 victims. There, they met 2 men, both named John. The first John, who told them he resided in a place called Castlemilk, chose Jean as his dance partner. The second didn't give them any information about where he lived, but danced with Helen. At the end of the evening, Castlemilk John took a bus home, while the other 3 caught a taxi. On the journey, John began acting strangely. He told them he didn't drink and quoted Bible verses about Moses. He claimed his father said dance halls were an adulterous den of iniquity. The taxi dropped Jean off at her home, and John and Helen continued their journey. Helen's body would be found the next morning in a state that connected her to the first 2 deaths. This would be the last in a string of crimes. Bible John simply disappeared without a trace. There have been a number of suspects over the years, including one victim who was exhumed so his DNA could be analyzed, but the result was inconclusive. Peter Tobin, who was convicted of taking the lives of 3 people, had also been connected to the crime. Tobin claims he wasn't Bible John, though has claimed responsibility for a number of other unsolved deaths. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.